there gamers, Retro Rob here, and today we're going to be looking at another one of my collections. This time it's the Emerson Arcadia 2001, known in Japan as the Bandai Arcadia. If you haven't heard of this thing, well, you can be forgiven because it was released way back in 1982, only survived about a year and a half, only had about 35 releases. Kind of an interesting system because it came out much after the Intellivision, and even though it had a K of RAM, which is quite a bit more than the Atari 2600, graphically it never really showed it. And I will definitely, while I'm showing you the game collection, I'll show you a little bit of gameplay so you get an idea of what it looked like. If you think you've heard the Arcadia name before, it's probably because you're familiar with Atari and the Arcadia Supercharger, which was later named to the Starpath Supercharger. It had these little stickers over it, and the reason for that is, of course, Emerson rightfully sued them for using their name, and that's fair enough. But that's probably where you might recognize the name from. Anyway, let's go look at the system and take a look at its games.
Warning: radiation at unsafe levels.
And here it is, the Arcadia 2001. You might be struck by how similar it looks to the Intellivision. It is, however, in no way an Intellivision. The games are not compatible, they do not use the same processor. No, nothing is actually shared except for a very similar look, especially in the controller. These sticks are indeed built in and come with the system, but you can take them out if you'd like. Don't know why you'd want to do that. This is actually a big improvement over what you put up with a standard Intellivision. Buttons on each side. It's kind of like an A-B, but it's pretty horrendous. It's not amazing, but the good news is it does seem to work pretty well. Curly cable, very nice, snaps into place after years and years of use. On the front we got a reset, select, option, start, and power button. There's a power light right up there. Alright, looking at the back, you've got headphone jack for the right player and a headphone jack for the left player. You have UHF out, you have channel 3, channel 4 selection, and you have 12 volt in. Looking at the bottom, we've got 4 rubber feet which have held up well to age. We have got a couple of vents down at the bottom, and I'm holding it upside down. I think you can live with it. Here it is from the side. I think it looks pretty cool this way, don't you? Look at that nice wedge. Not bad. Here is game number 1, and I'm going to go over this box a little bit deeper than I'll go into the other ones, largely because I think it's a good explanation on why the Arcadia 2001 failed. Now, they do have their own art style, but I don't really get how the art relates to the game very much. I mean, I guess there's a cat there, but mostly it's dogs. There's like 4 dogs, 5 dogs on the cover. 1 cat, if it's supposed to be a cat game. I don't know. It's not very compelling art. Not like what Atari did with their art. Their art was amazing. Side, I'm going to show you something they did do right. Notice how there is the number 1 on the spine. Collectors love to get all the numbered cartridges, so that was a good idea and probably pushed more sales than they would have had because people don't like gaps in their collections. That's really annoying. Even was back then. Still is now, and I've got a lot of gaps in my collection. The back, I think, really explains the problem here. And notice how there is no picture of the game at all on the back of the box, which that was commonplace by then. There was always a picture, even if it was mostly doctored. You got a pretty good idea of what the game looked like. I just don't understand why in this box they wouldn't have put a picture of what the game looked like. It's just ridiculous. It's like the main draw. Anyway, they do have a little bit of an explanation by the points of what the game's about, but it isn't really an explanation of the game. You know what I mean? It isn't like a narrative. And that's another thing that drives game purchases is narrative. And I don't think any of the games had a narrative. I'm gonna have to check. One of the interesting things about this is originally they were going to have a lot of licensed games for it. And unfortunately, Atari started suing like pretty much everybody who had licenses that were against their exclusive agreements. So they actually had a couple of games that they were going to release that were Atari exclusives, and therefore they weren't able to release them. They actually just renamed them. I think Defender was one. I'm trying to remember. I might mention more about that later, but I probably won't. So don't expect that. Anyway, basic black and white manual inside these. There's a little bit of the graphics right there, so I guess if you could open it up, you'd have been all right. By the way, there are overlays for many games. This game I didn't get with one, not 100% sure. I suppose we should talk about the big old elephant in the room, which is these gigantic cartridges. Wow, huh? Look at the size of that sucker. That is a monster of a cartridge. That said, it's kind of cool because the instructions are right on the cartridge because it's got room for it. So that's not bad. Then they got the name on the end, like a good cartridge should be. Let's go on to the next game. Next we have Escape, which is cartridge number 3, so I've missed a cartridge here. Not one that I actually have, but I am missing a cartridge. On the back, yet again, it has a description of the game instead of a picture. Get used to that. Inside we do have an insert, very nice, and a manual. Now, by looking at this game, you may think that this is a Pac-Man clone. It is not very much like Pac-Man at all. It doesn't even try to be. It's a lot more like Berserk. If you think Berserk, you're thinking along the right lines. There's shooting going on, there's a maze. It's actually a pretty good game and enjoyable. Space Raiders, which I think was originally licensed as Defender, and then became this, of course, after the Atari thing that I mentioned earlier. This is cartridge number 5. As you can see from the fine 5 on the spine, and looking at the back, you can see that it is a one-player only game. And yet again, it does this weird thing where they just show these points. Destroy them for points. You get... I don't know. I'm not a big fan of this particular style. Even though I kind of like the silver cartridges and the fact that these are gigantic. Yet again, we do have some overlays. And black and white manual. With a basic thumbnail sketch of what the game looks like. Next we have Space Vultures, which is a bit of a clone of games like Phoenix or maybe even Demon Attack, if you're a big fan of Demon Attack. And the artwork's a little bit better on this. I kind of like the artwork they went with on this. It's got their surreal look to it, but a little bit more, I don't know, a little bit more action. It draws me in a little bit more. It makes me want to play it. That said, it's far inferior to either Phoenix or Demon Attack, so it's not really that amazing. And there we go, nice big cartridge here, yet again, and back to that black and white manual that they are so fond of. We have Alien Invaders, which is of course a Space Invaders knockoff. That said, this one shows the Arcadia 2001's graphical prowess over the Atari 2600 more probably than any other game for this system I can think of. It's got some large buildings in the background. It does actually have some fairly nice looks and nice gameplay to it. And if you have the system, I would consider this kind of a must pick up game. And unfortunately, I don't have the inserts for it. We're back to that black and white manual, and of course, look at this cartridge size. Hold on a second. Half the size. Maybe they well, it's not half the size, but still, it's much smaller than the other cartridges. Maybe they figured out that it doesn't need to be huge. Not sure. Here we have 3D bowling, which is bowling, all right. It's not as good as the Atari 2600 bowling in my humble opinion, but then again, not a lot of bowling games are. There's not much that's much better than the good old classic. I realize Atari bowling's not much, but you can play with anybody and they're going to enjoy it, which I don't really feel the same about this. Anyway, I think the art's not too bad. Going around to the side. Going around to the side. There we have cartridge number 13, the lucky one. On the back, of course, we are still going with this idea that you should not show graphics under any circumstances on the back of a box. Notice how this is a small cartridge too. I wonder if they did that to save money. I bet that's true. I bet they shrunk the cartridges over time to save some cash. Of course, do have an overlay, and it looks a little bit more advanced of an overlay than they generally put in. We of course have your basic black and white manual. Pretty basic. And here we have American football, which yeah, it's not very exciting. I got it with the system, so, you know. It's number 14. Has the usual no picture on the back. Has a pretty decent little overlay though. It's a nice overlay. Doesn't excite me much. I have no idea why we call this football in the United States. I was gonna look up the history of that. I'm gonna have to, because that's kind of weird that the rest of the world calls soccer football and we call soccer soccer, but whatever. Speaking of soccer, here we have some soccer. Another game I haven't even really bothered to play. Oh look, this one has part of somebody's dinner on it. I'm just gonna back my thumb off of that. Here we have the manual. The game itself. This must be a later one because it's smaller. And a description of the game on the back, keeping with their stubborn pattern of not showing any pictures of the game so that they could show up how good their graphics are. Last, but definitely not least, we have Jungler for the Arcadia, and this is actually a fun game. Also has a fairly decent cover. It's number 23. Unfortunately, they didn't put pictures of it on the back. It doesn't look exciting, but as far as games for the system go, this game is actually pretty darn good. It's a little bit like Snake, but you basically try to shoot the parts off the other snake and get them short enough to eat them. It's really a pretty neat game. Has the overlay. And has this, which I've not found in any of my other boxes, and I'm totally gonna make a video on this because I love doing videos on these little catalogs, so really excited about that. So it's the last game, but at least it's a good game. And there we are, my complete Emerson Arcadia 2001 collection. Have you ever played this game system? Do you like it? Is it something you'd like to pick up? Let me know in the comments down below. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing and give it a thumbs up. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you in a couple days. Bye.